Good afternoon. Wow. Whoever tech checked after me last night had a smaller voice. I've scared myself now. My name's Kevin Miller. I'm a principal program manager in the devices and networking team at Microsoft. And you've been hearing a lot already about the work that we're doing to reimagine Windows for Windows 8. And what I'm going to do over the next hour is talk a little more specifically about creating great device experiences. Now, we've spent a lot of time during the course of this project thinking about devices throughout their entire lifetime, from original design of the hardware to design of drivers, metadata, companion applications, how these things are all packaged, distributed, how they get installed on people's machines, what the user experience is for somebody using one of those machines, and then how we gather information back about how that experience went, what the user did, what they didn't do, what worked, what didn't work, and then how we feed all of that information back into the design process for the next generation of products. So if there's one thing and only one thing that you remember from this talk, it's that Microsoft is doing a lot of investment throughout the life cycle, or if you'll forgive me, a reference to the park across the street, the circle of life of these products. And there's an opportunity for you to leverage Microsoft's investment to create great customer experiences more easily. Now, I understand that there is a natural tension between easy and great. You know, if it's really easy, is it going to be great? If it's great, was it really easy? And so what we're doing is we're looking at that great, easy balance a couple of ways. One way that we're looking at it is to say, where are there places that we can put development resources into the platform so that we write code and you don't have to write it. So you can think of things like that, the driver foundations. So where we're moving code out of the driver and into the frameworks. I just said foundations, the driver frameworks. Another place is really the whole Metro-style model, where we're trying to write a lot of code in the libraries, adding functionality into the programming languages. So there are experiences that you're able to provide that you don't have to do that much coding to get to. So that's one way that we're trying to balance that great, easy thing. And then the other way that we're trying to balance it is by understanding what are some common tasks. What are the things that our partners have to do every day? And are there ways that we can simplify those tasks or automate those tasks or make collaboration easier? And so that's the other aspect of this. So as I move through this talk today, please keep in mind to be looking out for places where Microsoft's making an investment so you don't have to, so you can leverage it. Or Microsoft is taking a common, especially repetitive, especially painful action or task that you have to do and simplifying it. So in a more agenda-like way, part of this talk is to walk through this life cycle for a product, and show you where we're making investments, how we're thinking about it, highlight places that you can really leverage that. And at the end of this talk, in addition to having some context for the other talks in this track, you'll have ideas of where to go to find more information, both here at Build, where I'll give you a little lay of the land on following sessions and hands-on labs and chalk talks, and then also outside Build. All right, so my circle of life for a hardware product then begins with making a customer-partner connection. That's really, how do I get what I need when I need it? And the what, in this case, is pretty broadly defined. This is design information, samples, documentation, access to communities of people who are trying to do similar things, access to tools and kits, just where you get everything that you need along the way. The second bucket of this is design and develop. That's how to think about creating these experiences for Windows, and then how to actually build them using the Visual Studio and the various Windows kits. And finally, assess and certify. Certify is the artist formerly known as Logo, for those of you who have experience with us in the past, so you have some context on that. And assessment is, how do I make sure that what I'm building really lights up for customers and creates great experiences? So first, let me talk about this customer-partner connections. And to egregiously illustrate what I'm going to do, I thought I would create a new device myself. And for those of you who were in here when I lost my water bottle will understand that I tend to lose a lot of stuff. So what I really want in a device is a USB stick that I can't lose. And I have lost so many of these things that I would guess that an archaeologist doing a dig at my house would be able to tell everywhere I'd ever stood in the house. And they would probably go, there are these little devices that he must have worshipped because he kept them with him at all times. I mean, at $10 a pop, I still bet I've spent $500 on these things and lost them. So I want one of these things that I can't lose. So there's a little tiny thing that I will lose in 5 minutes. It's a miracle that I actually got it here to the conference. I thought I'd lost it on my way twice. So I thought, okay, first I will sew it into something elegant and hard to lose. And then I will make it make a noise. That's just for the sound guy. All right, so when I have lost it, I can find it again. And I will need some sort of control device to sew into it so I can actually give it commands. And I'm going to use the handy-dandy USB FX2 device that you will probably see a lot this week. There's even a sample of it online. So I'm going to sew all this together and create Kevin's simple and effective device to keep from losing a USB stick. So step one of this process is, how do I get started? And other than log back onto my machine, which went to sleep while I was standing there, now what I want to be able to do is go find what I need. So let me see if I can actually go find what I need. That'd be nice. All right, so this is the new Windows Hardware Developer Center. It just went live last night. So this is actually the public site, and you can go there. The idea, though, is to say for someone who's trying to build a new hardware-centric device, or really build anything for Windows, that there's one logical place that you can go to find out what you really need to find out. And so I'm going to come back to that in just a second. But let me slip back to the PowerPoint for just a second. So the highlights there are, I've got a new device. I want to find out information about design. I want to learn about the artist formerly known as Logo, now called certification. I want to get the kits that I need to actually build the thing. I'm going to get Visual Studio, because I need Visual Studio as a base for all of this. I want to find other people who are building similar devices, although I hope that nobody else has tried to build this exact device. And then I want to be able to access samples, documentation, etc. So let me switch back now. Hopefully that'll be my only preemptive jump to the wrong thing. All right, so then the Development Center, on the top page, you see this What's New for Windows 8. And you have access to a lot of the stuff that you're seeing here. But one of the things that I want to highlight is, in the past, it was awfully hard to get started. The first step on the ladder to building a great piece of hardware and a hardware experience on Windows was a doozy. And so we're trying to bring this all together so that if you go to Bing, or if you don't use Bing, DuckDuckGo, and you do a search for I want to write a Windows device driver, you're going to end up at a place that really has everything that you need to get started. And one of the things that we're doing now, and we just pushed about 35 or 36 of these live last night, is that the samples, not only from the WDK, but from from other kits and Windows samples in general are now available in a very nicely searchable format. So you can go down and say, okay, I care, for instance, about networking, and I'm the sort of person that learns best by looking at some existing code. So you can go down and say, okay, there's an Indus filter driver. Great. I want to look and see what that thing looks like. You get a nice description that's consistent across all the samples. This is another improvement for Windows 8. In the past, the different samples had different sorts of documentation. Now we're trying to streamline that and make them all very similar. So as you see at the top, let me zoom into this just a little bit. As you see at the top, there's a download button for samples that are available in multiple languages. You can download them in multiple languages. A standard description. You can browse the code, and you get a nicely edited, color-coded version of the code, so you can actually immediately start walking through, trying to understand it, download the sample, build it, off you go. And again, the whole idea here is to make it dramatically easier for somebody who's starting out to get started. So from that same spot, you can go down and look at the docs. You know, what is a device driver? If you're somebody like me who had a potentially very flawed idea of a new device, or if you're somebody who really knows what you're doing, you can start there, get some, what's a driver? What do I need? How do I think about the driver models? How do I get started? What's the sort of stuff that I need to figure out along the way? So that is getting started, and it's also the customer connection piece of this. All right, so then moving on from that to design and development. So first, the context for this whole thing is and you've already seen this in the major sessions before, we're making a major investment in Windows 8 to really light up experiences around hardware. So a customer, inserts a hardware device into a computer, and really good stuff happens. We're putting a big focus on this. And so there's a huge opportunity to differentiate by making sure that you leverage these standard Windows experiences, that you provide something that really has an immediate impact on customers. And if you go ahead and use the class drivers or build on top of the class drivers using the inbox functionality, using the standard interfaces to do that, you get these experiences for free. So then the question becomes, how do I create a special custom experience that lights up when I insert the device? So with Kevin's elegant device, the light up experience I want an application that installs the first time that I plug this thing into my computer. And that application will then make the lovely sound, which I won't inflict on the sound guy again, to go find it, right? So, I know my example here is trivial, but it does highlight the fact that a lot of innovation happens when people try to fulfill their needs or their customer needs, and they follow their nose. And if you think about this whole idea of making it easier to create great customer experiences, part of what we're doing is we're trying to lower the bar for innovation. And so I want an application. Now, in any version of Windows up till now, I would immediately be in a tough spot here. I want an application that's associated with my driver, my piece of hardware, but it's really not good to package applications with drivers, and it's really not good to package drivers with applications. And so there really hasn't been an excellent solution to this problem. You would go, you end up with these customer situations where the customer gets a device. The device has a big piece of tape on it that says, whatever you do, don't insert this device in the computer. Put the CD in first. And then the CD goes and installs the driver and the packages and a bunch of other stuff. And that sort of works the first time, as long as the user is actually paying any attention whatsoever. And I assume from the fact that a lot of hardware vendors put cardboard and tape and marker and flashing lights on these things saying don't insert, that users tend to just insert them. And then you get the driver, but no application. Right. So what we're trying to do now, well, it's actually worse than that. Because if it's like at my house, I buy the thing, and I play with it for a couple of months, and then I buy a new one, and I give it to my kid, and I've lost the CD, I guarantee you, by that point. If I even ever remember that I had one. And so then my kid just plugs the device in, and again loses out. So one of the really big opportunities here is to leverage these Metro-style apps, in particular Metro-style device apps, to create an experience where you stick the piece of hardware in, and the driver comes down from Woo like God intended drivers to come down, and it doesn't have a bunch of other stuff in it that you have to maintain or support outside of the Woo channel. And then Windows recognizes the hardware ID, says, oh, there's an application available for this, and automatically loads that application onto the machine. At that point, you've got the best of both worlds. You have an application being installed like an application and managed and supported like an application. And you have a driver that's just a driver. It doesn't have a bunch of other goo attached to it. So I'm going to actually talk in more detail about this one in just a second. So, but before I come back to that, let me talk a little bit about custom drivers. So again, in the theme of leveraging what the code that Microsoft has written, there's a big opportunity to make productivity of developers better by leveraging the driver frameworks. Just things like plug and play, power management, which as you've already seen is a big focus in Windows 8. A lot of supporting code for those in the frameworks, which means you do not have to put that in the driver. The driver just has to be able to answer the callback from the system that says, hey, the following thing has changed in the power management infrastructure or in this plug and play event has happened. And all you have to do is write the thing that catches that callback. Similarly, if you're talking about writing a custom driver, we're doing a lot of work this time integrating driver development into Visual Studio to make it easier to find defects early in the development process. If it's not ever found by you or us, it ends up causing potentially causing a crash or at least an unhappy customer experience on the other end. Bugs found at certification are a lot more expensive to fix than the bugs that are found on the developer's desktop. So doing a lot of work, and I'll show a little bit of this, and there are subsequent talks that will go into a lot more detail. But there's a big effort here to find and fix errors early. And then I mentioned this earlier, that we're spending some pretty serious focus on understanding what developers really do and testers really do, and trying to make the end-to-end experience for the developer and the tester really good, just like we're making the end-to-end experience for the customer really good. So I mentioned a couple times Visual Studio is the basis for driver development for Windows 8. In the USB stick that you guys got handed out to you, there is a copy of Visual Studio Ultimate. The laptops that you got have Visual Studio Express pre-installed. You need Ultimate to do driver development. It's on the stick. The WDK is on the stick as well. So you have copies of all that stuff in the materials from the conference, and there are also hands-on labs, and I'll come back to those in a little bit, but there are also hands-on labs where you can go through and you can work through a bunch of this stuff. So driver-specific goals, because that's my day job. Developer productivity. A lot of work to integrate driver development into Visual Studio. The #1 request that we've received for many years in the WDK team is we would like to be able to use Microsoft's flagship development tools to build drivers instead of those being a separate command line kits. So it's integrated into Visual Studio, not just the build process, but also testing, signing, deployment, kernel mode debugging, that's all doable from Visual Studio. I talked a little bit about this quality upstream. Part of the upstream is to take a bunch of the tests that you have to run to pass certification, move those onto the developer desktop as unit tests. Part of that is identifying critical tools, static analysis, standard static driver verifier, and moving those into Visual Studio. And then I already mentioned the frameworks, and a focus that you'll see a lot more in some of the follow-on talks on common tasks that developers do every day. I need to build, package, sign, remotely deploy my machine, run some tests on it, and debug it. That should not be a heinous experience that builds character and nothing else. OK, so I'm going to talk a little bit more about Kevin's elegant and beautiful device, and even I'm tired of looking at the thing. So to create Kevin's elegant device, I need a device driver that knows how to talk to that little control thing. And I need a Metro-style device application on top that knows how to do the go find me thing. So starting with at the bottom of the stack with the driver, I have a driver for this FX2 device, which you'll see a lot over the next couple of days. So the driver for this, in particular, has some function that lets you light up the display. And that's the part of it that I'm actually going to use in my little app. So in the driver, there's a set 7-segment display entry point. And it sends a message, but this is a UMDF driver. So it sends a message to the hardware to set the little bars on a 7-segment LED display. Right? Getting the 7-segment display to do something other than numbers took me longer than the rest of the demo, and that's a good sign. So building a driver in Visual Studio then, how about really building a driver in Visual Studio? It's completely integrated now. The WDK is installed as a Visual Studio add-on pack. This leverages the compilers and libraries and everything from Visual Studio. The WDK only adds in the functionality that's specific to building a driver, so kernel mode libraries, for instance. So you can do everything from Visual Studio, and when you want to deploy the driver, you just click the button that says deploy. And I don't have time to do it in this talk, but basically you tell through Visual Studio, you say, this is the machine that I'm going to deploy to. And we automatically provision that machine, set up kernel mode debugging on it and everything, so you're off to the races. So I have the driver. Now I need something that will sit between the driver and my little app. And it's taunting me. Get out of full screen mode again. OK, so now I have a DLL, and all the DLL does is expose to my I almost did it. I really sort of did it. To my application, the call to the device driver. All right, so again, I can build the DLL inside, really build the DLL inside Visual Studio. So now I have on the bottom layer the driver. In the middle layer, I have a little C++ DLL. And it has now a function called put 7-segment display. And all it does now is call the driver. All right. So finally now, I'm doing a Metro-style device application. So when the designer loads here, you'll see that I am, in addition to my many other skills, a brilliant UI guy. That was not the part of the demo I thought I might have trouble with. OK, so I have an application that is just a black button on a black background, not unlike a black speaker shirt in front of a black curtain. It says Find Me. All the Find Me application does is it has a tooltip, help me locate the blankety blank blank USB thing, because that's about the mood I'd be in by the time I've lost this one too. The application then, let's switch back to full screen mode, has the GUID that corresponds to this device. And the entirety of my application is the auto-generated code plus this OpenFX2 device, where I create a string selector. I create a selector string, which is just the GUID plus looking for devices that are enabled. And then I try, using the new C# await keyword, asynchronously go get devices that match that description. So that's really, line of code 1. I use really bad programming practice and ignore exception return. Then, if a device was found, I say, OK, that's the device I was looking for, and I go get the device from ID. So that's really line of code 3, I guess. And then I call my little function that just flashes the LED display so I know that I actually got to it. And that's it. So now I have now I have that device, and I can go access it. So then I double-clicked in the designer. I double-clicked on my Find Me button, which created this entry point for me on button click. And just for yucks, I grab the display, the value that's currently being displayed on the segment. And if I'd actually catch that exception, if it's displaying some strange thing, I blank it. And then I spell the word ba in honor of the noise. And then I put the value that was on the display back in it after it does that. OK, so again, that's only a handful of lines of code, but it actually does something interesting, right? It connects to the hardware device from a new style application, a Metro style device app. It makes that connection and lets you touch that device using this thin C# C++ DLL layer to actually make the conversion. So what do you have to do at the high level of the app to make that work? So you have this app manifest package that's auto-created when you do new Metro style app. And I did C# app just because that seems the least crazy to me. You can set capabilities for what you want this application to be able to do. The package name, the certificate, so you can control the security. And then you can actually set things like logos here. So if you want, if I want this beautiful app, if I just build this app now, it'll build it, deploy it, show my beautiful UI with my tooltip. And then when I click the find thing, it spells ba on the 7-segment display, thrilling everyone. But the important thing here is that there's a lot of code that I didn't actually have to write to get that to work, right? So, but by having deployed that, now when I go back to the desktop, that app has been provisioned. Now, if I want to make it look better or more horrifying depending on your point of view. I can go into pictures. Rebuild again. The metadata automatically gets updated. When the app is deployed, it gets deployed with the new icon. So now when the user, meaning me in this case, is horrified that he's lost yet another USB stick, I get a beautiful icon that you can tell somebody in the graphics group at Microsoft is just throwing up into a bucket right now. Okay. So what was required to make that work? In this app manifest package, let me open it with Notepad instead of with the, let me think about opening it with Notepad. Down at the bottom here, there's the capabilities, which says this application is available to make a call to this DLL that I created, which is an activatable class ID samples.devices.fx2.fx2device. So just that metadata says, OK, this app has access to this and only this. You make sure the signing is correct on both sides, and off you go. So let me look at one more thing while I'm in here, which is device metadata. And let me reopen this one. So, yeah, sure it doesn't. So I'm going to load one here rather than you guys watch me type, because that would be extra painful. So this is another thing that you would have had to do separately from Visual Studio in the past. Now in Visual Studio, you have the ability to run the wizard, step through, set the package definition, icons. Again, this is for the FX2 device, the description of the device, its category of device, the hardware ID. So this is where the store, this is how the store pairs back. The application, this is saying that my, this is how you connect the application back to the DLL and to the device. This updates the metadata on the machine. That way, the next time that device is installed, in this particular case, I mean the FX2 device, you get the icon loaded into device view, and you also get, you're able to connect the application to it. So let me switch back to the slides. So you've made through a chunk of design and development. Now, the third step of that triangle of life is assessment and certification. So part of this is what was formerly called logo. It's how you make sure that the experience that you're building actually lights up for customers. And part of this is assessment. It's, in this case, I mean system-wide assessment, where you're trying to understand exactly at a system level what the experience of your customers is. How do you predict good customer experiences? So the ADK is designed to help you exceed customer expectations. And part of that is by trying to assess systems according to the way customers actually use them, and not just, OK, well, this system has this particular hardware characteristic. It's more like, how does the system work for the customer? And so the ADK focus is making these assessments more customer relevant or more mappable back to real customer experiences. And they do that by looking at the entire system, from the hardware plus Windows, plus the drivers, plus the value-add software. OK, when this system is really loaded up the way my customer is going to use it, how does it work? So that's what you get. And how you get it with the ADK is that team has done a lot of work, and Mike Beck is going to talk about this in a talk that he's doing later on, but trying to make it simpler to do these full assessments. So providing a real end-to-end platform so you can provision one or multiple machines, gather the information across a range of real scenarios, automatically deploy, automatically manage, make it easy to share information once you get it back. So you can say, hey, I found the issue. I want to package up the results of that run. Not just the summary of that one, the real full results of that run, and share it with somebody else who can then do some further analysis on it. So just a quick look at the ADK. And the ADK is really the evolution of functionality that was formerly provided in the OEM pre-install kit, OPK, and in Wake. And so it's really changed a lot. And again, like a lot of this stuff that I mentioned earlier, the evolution of it, the reimagining of it, is to try to make it dramatically easier to get great results. So this is the Windows Assessment Console, and you can see that what the assessments are aligned to scenarios. They do a lot of deep system analysis along the way, but they're really aligned to scenarios. So, Windows experiences, file handling, photo handling, i.e. startup. These are, classic scenarios. The one that I was looking at myself a little bit was idle energy efficiency. And so I ran that assessment on this machine with a bunch of stuff loaded on it. And so you get a set of results, and you can then drill down on the results to an incredibly low level of granularity. But this ran a bunch of assessments and then came back and said, OK, here are the energy efficiency results. Here are some issues that were discovered along the way, and some of them are relatively minor, like radio power policy is maximum performance. So you could adjust that to make a minor difference. And then the red ones are ones that make a lot bigger difference. So for instance, not surprising that sleep did not perform well on this laptop because it was not enabled. So you get some feedback that's like, duh, enable sleep in this power setting, and guess what? It'll actually sleep. But then some of them are things like, OK, active C-state residency. So residency was 6.79%, which is above the target rate of 1% for idle. High CPU utilization during idle can keep the system in a higher power state, et cetera, et cetera. And then there's an analysis link. And when you follow the analysis link, you get a much more granular view of what's going on in the system. And it allows you at this point then to drill down to the excruciatingly deep level of detail that you might need to really debug this. But again, a couple of major takeaways here. One is you're getting some more specific guidance and analysis. So the tool's coming back and saying, here's some things you ought to look at. Here's how to look at them. And then if you want to share them, it's very easy to package up the logs and send them to another person. It's like if you need some help wading through one. So the ADK is also on the stick. OK, certification. So I talked about this a little bit along the way. But there are a couple of major investments here, similar to the stuff that I've described before, combination of doing more work in the tool so you don't have to do it, and then making it much easier to do common tasks. Just a moment, please. There's got to be an over and under bet on how many people from Redmond you can put in a black shirt and put outside in California and not fall over dead. OK. And if anybody is doing that pool, I want in. OK. So certification then is the evolution of logo. But again, a couple of major focuses here. One is the model for certification is dramatically simplified. So instead of having the person who's trying to run the certification task have to construct a model, and going back to Kevin's beautiful and elegant device, so when I've got the thing built, it's got a USB stick in it, and it's got a radio in it because I want to send it the wake up and make noise message. I'm asking you to suspend belief on how big of a battery it would take to provide this. Okay, but to logo that device, I should not have to create a covering set of logos. I shouldn't have to create multiple logos to that. Logo it as a radio, logo it as a USB stick, logo it as a whatever else, right? I should be able to logo it as its own thing. And so one of the big changes in certification is that now the system will evaluate a device and come back and say, okay, based on the functionality of this device, here's the sort of stuff that you need to pass to get a logo for that device as a single device, instead of as some sort of composite device. So the model is simplified, and there's a lot more automation there. Similarly, we're trying to make it easier for the person who actually has to do this to do it. Right? So that's partially restructuring the tools, creating a public object model that allows you to automate the running of certification across multiple systems. There's I hope that's coming across as a theme here, that we're trying to do these two things, right? Move some more functionality into the tools and into the system so you don't have to do so much stuff. And then make it easier to do the things that you do have to do. So you can focus on what's differentiating about your product and spend less time on the stuff that you just have to do because you have to do it. So in the circle of life model then, this gets back all the way back to customer and partner connections. So there's a new site off of that hardware center, which hopefully I didn't close. But I might have. I closed it. It just says basically this anyway. It's coming soon. There's a new HDC dashboard, which will be off of that hardware developer center I showed at the beginning. And that's going live at beta. And at that point, you can sign on to the dashboard, and you can do the things that you really, where being signed on makes a difference. You can submit driver packages for certification. You can upload the device metadata that you need for the driver so it shows up correctly in the devices view, device manager, and also so you can make the upload the metadata that's needed for the Metro style device app. You can publish drivers to Windows Update. And this bottom one is really important. If you think back to at the beginning when I talked about how do we find out what customers did, what worked, what didn't work, this is a way to go back to go in and get the sort of data that you want. It goes back into that theme of how do I get what I need when I need it. So it's use telemetry. How many people installed my device from Windows Update? What kind of bugs did we see? And you can customize those reports so you get them the way that you want them, and you can share them. And you don't have to. You can, for instance, go and construct a product description that ties together telemetry that might come from a couple different aspects into an individual product. For instance, I could tie the telemetry back from my elegant device so that it was more consumable by me. So I'm going to spend the last few minutes pointing you to the places where you can go to find a lot more information about stuff. So I have kind of a roadmap for the hardware-related stuff in the conference. But before I get there, I want to say, again, the big opportunity here is to leverage the stuff that we've done to create great customer experiences, differentiating customer experiences for when they stick a hardware device in. So customer partner connections, what do I need when I need it? Design and develop. We have these out-of-the-box experiences in Windows 8. And as you've seen, they're pretty amazing. So how do you build systems that leverage that? I have a lot of new tool work, especially around Visual Studio integration, that should make it lots easier to get good products to market quickly. And then assessment and certification. How do you think about using the ADK and the certification kit to assess system performance, address any issues, and then have a certification that says, you know what, when the customer inserts this device, they're going to have a good experience. So related sessions. Again, broken up into these three categories of customer partner connections, design and develop, and assess and certify. So starting from here, there's a packaging and distribution talk. It's number 903, and a improving code quality talk. That's number 62. Those are both in the how do I get packages built that go to customers in ways that they can deal with them, and how do I get telemetry back. The error reporting one had a lot of stuff in it that I did not know anything about. Design and development. There's a talk by Jim Cavaleris. I think it's in this room in about an hour on designing great devices and drivers. And then one by Peter Wieland on using the driver frameworks to build better drivers. So that's the design part, design and develop. Tomorrow morning, there's a developing drivers in Visual Studio talk. And then following on from that one, a really good drill-down session on moving driver quality upstream. It talks about writing tests, running verification and analysis tools, really how to think about quality. It's the all-up, what's quality mean in Windows 8, driver quality in Windows 8. And then number 98 is a Windows kernel debugging talk in Visual Studio. So again, that's another big focus here is getting the tools that you need in Visual Studio. You shouldn't have to be alt-tabbing 200 times an hour to move from tool to tool to tool to do the same job, right? So you can build the driver in Visual Studio. You can enter the metadata in Visual Studio. You can test it and deploy it from Visual Studio. You can kernel debug from Visual Studio. Then assessment and certification. There's Mike Beck's doing a overview of the assessment and deployment kit. And then there's a more drilled down talk from that on using the toolkit that I just sort of waved at today to do much deeper performance assessments. And then a two-talk mini track on certification. The first one being an overview of the program, and then the following talk being, okay, how does the kit work? But here's what I really want to talk about. Let me start at the bottom, because then I may come back to the bottom. The hands-on labs are pretty good. Some of the first one I did was fantastic. It was the best lab I've ever done. So that's a good sign. It's the experiencing Windows Driver Kit integration with Visual Studio. Because in the course of going through that lab, and it takes maybe an hour. I guess if you did every possible thing, it might take more like an hour and a half. But it's everything from building a driver from the UI or from the command line, how you package, how you deploy to a remote machine, how you debug on that remote machine, how you run the analysis tools, how you run tests, how you write tests. It covers a lot of ground, and it's really well designed. In general, my belief is that these hands-on labs are really good, and there are people standing around at them to help and to answer questions, which makes them even better. So really think those are big, a big opportunity. Plus, you can always yell at the person who's standing there, which is great. In addition to the sessions, there are some chalk talks. You've probably already heard this, but the chalk talk format is some opening remarks and then a pretty extended Q&A session. The specific Stump the Chumps one on device drivers is Karam and Janet back there in the back. Stand up, wave. Go ask them really hard questions. So Chalk Talks hands-on labs, in addition to the sessions, there's a lot of stuff going on there. So I think I'm down to about 11 minutes and 29 seconds, according to my beautiful timer here. So I'll take a couple of general questions, or you can just come up and ask me afterwards. Thank you very much.